The lymphatic system. The lymphatic system defends against infection and fights against disease. Lymph is a fluid connective tissue that transports substances and provides moisture. The vessels that carry lymph are called lymphatic vessels, and the cells suspended within the liquid are known as lymphocytes. Specialized lymph tissues and organs control the lymph environment. Lymph consists of interstitial fluid, similar to blood plasma, but with a lower concentration of protein, lymphocyte cells responsible for the immune response, and macrophages of various types. The functions of the lymph system include maintaining the number of lymphocytes by primary structures such as bone marrow and thymus, which produce B, T, and NK cells. Secondary structures such as the lymph nodes and the tonsils produce B cells. To maintain normal blood volume and the chemistry of lymph, and to provide an alternative route for the transport of hormones, nutrients, and waste products. Lymphatic vessels carry lymph from peripheral tissues to the venous system. Lymphatic vessels range in size from smaller capillaries to larger lymphatic ducts. Lymphatic capillaries, or terminal lymphatics. Lymphatic capillaries are larger both in diameter and in sectional view. Lymphatic capillaries have thinner walls because their endothelial cells lack a continuous basal lamina. Lymphatic capillaries typically have a flat or irregular outline. Lymphatic capillaries have collagenous anchoring filaments, and lymphatic capillaries have endothelial cells that overlap instead of being tightly bound to one another. The region of the endothelial cell overlap acts as a one-way valve, permitting the passage of interstitial fluid into the lymphatic capillary, but preventing its escape. Endothelial cells are fenestrated with pores in the cells and gaps between cells to allow for lymph to freely access vessels. The gaps between endothelial cells are large enough that the lymphatic capillaries might absorb any viruses or other abnormal items such as cell debris or bacteria. Prominent lymphatic capillaries in the small intestine, called lacteals, transport lipids absorbed by the digestive tract. Did you know lymph is absent in the cartilage, in the eye's cornea, bone marrow, and the central nervous system? Edema is swelling. The valves of the lymphatic vessels go from capillaries to vessels to lymph trunks, then to cavities. The lymphatic system pressure is less than that of the cardiovascular system. Lymphedema. If a lymphatic vessel is compressed or blocked, or its valves are damaged, lymph drainage slows or ceases in the affected area. When fluid continues to leave the vascular capillaries in that region, but the lymphoid system is no longer able to remove it, the interstitial fluid volume and pressure gradually increases. Lymph vessels are found near blood vessels. Arteries are often depicted as bright red, veins dark red, and lymphatics pale golden color. Major lymph collecting vessels can be superficial or deep. Superficial lymphatics travel with superficial veins and are found in the following locations: the subcutaneous layer next to the skin, the loose connective tissue, and the mucous membranes lining the digestive, respiratory, urinary, and repro tracts. The loose connective tissues are the serous membrane lining the pleura, pericardial, and peritoneal cavities. Deep lymphatics accompany the deep arteries and veins, and these lymphatic vessels collect lymph from skeletal muscles and other organs of the neck, limbs, and trunk, as well as visceral organs in the thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavities. Within the trunk, superficial and deep lymphatics converge to form large vessels called lymphatic trunks, such as the lumbar trunk, the interstitial trunk, the bronchomediastinal trunk, subclavian trunk, and the jugular trunk. The lymphatic trunk empties into lymphatic ducts that deliver lymph to venous systems. The thoracic duct collects lymph from both sides of the body, inferior to the diaphragm, and from the left side of the body, superior to the diaphragm. The base of the thoracic duct is an expanded sac-like chamber known as the cisternae chyli, which receives lymph from the inferior region of the abdomen, pelvis, and lower limbs through the right and left lumbar trunks and intestinal trunks. The inferior segment of the thoracic duct lies anterior to the vertebral column. From its origin anterior to the second lumbar vertebrae, it penetrates the diaphragm with the aorta at an opening known as the aortic hiatus and ascends along the left side of the vertebral column to the left level of the left clavicle. After collecting lymph from the left bronchomediastinal trunk, the left subclavian trunk, and the left jugular trunk, it empties into the left subclavian vein near the base of the left internal jugular vein. The relatively small right lymphatic duct collects lymph from the right side of the body above the diaphragm. The right lymphatic duct receives lymph from smaller lymphatic vessels that converge in the region of the right clavicle. This duct empties into the venous system at or near the junction of the right internal jugular vein and the right subclavian vein. Lymphocytes respond to the presence of bacteria and viri, abnormal body cells known as cancer cells, or foreign particles such as toxins released by some bacteria. There are three types of lymphocytes: T cells, B cells, and NK cells. T cells. 80% of lymphocytes are T cells that are cytotoxic or attack cells. T cells attack foreign cells or cells infected by viri. T cells provide all cell-mediated immunity. There are helper T cells and suppressor T cells, which assist in regulation and coordination of immunity. There are also regulatory T cells and memory T cells, which record exposure to a particular antigen. B cells account for 10 to 15% of circulating lymphocytes. B cells differentiate into a plasmacyte, which is responsible for the production and secretion of antibodies. NK cells are 5 to 10% of circulating lymphocytes. They attack foreign cells, cancer cells, and normal cells infected with viri. NK cells provide immunological surveillance. The goal of the immune system is the destruction and inactivation of pathogens, abnormal cells, and foreign molecules such as toxins. T cells directly attack. B cells circulate antibodies, also known as the antibody-mediated immunity. The distribution and lifespan of lymphocytes. The ratio of B cells to T cells varies depending upon each organ. Blood, 8 to 1, spleen, 1 to 1, and bone marrow, 1 to 3. Lymphopoiesis begins in the bone marrow and thymus. Lymphoid stem cells can either 1. Remain in the bone marrow and divide to produce NK cells and B cells, which gain immunocompetence and migrate into the peripheral tissues, or 2. The second group migrates to the thymus. Acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, results from infection with a virus that selectively destroys T cells. Lymphoid tissues are connective tissues dominated by lymphocytes. Lymphoid nodules are oval aggregations of lymphocytes contained within a supporting framework of reticular fibers. MALT, or mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, is found in lymphoid nodules. Large nodules in the wall of the pharynx are called tonsils. There are usually 5 tonsils: a single pharyngeal tonsil, known as the adenoids, a pair of palatine tonsils, a pair of laryngeal tonsils. Please memorize the location of the tonsils. Clusters of lymphoid tissues or nodules in the mucosal lining of the small intestine are known as aggregated lymphoid nodules or Peyer's patches. The appendix is a blind pouch that contains a mass of fused lymphoid nodules. There are 3 lymphoid organs: the nodes, the thymus, and the spleen. The nodes are small, oval lymphoid organs ranging in diameter from 1 to 25 millimeters. Each node is covered by a dense, fibrous connective tissue capsule that extends from the capsule into the interior of the node, known as a trabeculae. Blood vessels enter afferent vessels and exit efferent the node at the hilum. Dendritic cells collect antigens from the lymph and present them in the cell membranes. After flowing through the sinuses of the deep cortex, the lymph continues into the core or medulla of the lymph node. The core containing B cells are organized into elongate masses known as medullary cords. The largest lymph nodes are found where peripheral lymphatics connect with the trunk. The distribution of lymphoid tissues and lymph nodes includes cervical lymph nodes, axillary lymph nodes, popliteal lymph nodes, thoracic lymph nodes, abdominal lymph nodes, and lymphoid tissues of Peyer's patches. The thymus lies posterior to the manubrium of the sternum in the posterior portion of the mediastinum. Fibrous partitions or septa extend from the capsule to divide two sections or lobes into lobules averaging 2 millimeters in width, known as the outer cortex and the central medulla. The blood-thymus barrier prevents premature stimulation of the developing T cells by circulating antigens. Reticular cells are scattered among the lymphocytes of the thymus. In the medulla, these cells cluster together in concentric layers, forming distinctive structures known as the thymic corpuscles, whose function remains unknown. The spleen is the largest lymphoid organ in the body. It is 12 centimeters long and weighs 5.6 ounces. It is attached to the lateral border of the stomach by a broad mesenteric band known as the gastrosplenic ligament. The functions of the spleen are to remove abnormal blood cells and other blood components through phagocytosis, the storage of iron recycled from broken down red blood cells, and the initiation of immune responses by B cells and T cells in response to antigens in the circulating blood. Of the spleen. The spleen contains red pulp, red blood cells, and white pulp, or lymphoid nodules. The cell population of the red pulp includes all of the normal components of the circulating blood, macrophages, large sinusoids, trabeculi, and hilum. Lymphoid system. Because of aging, the lymph system is less effective. T and B cells decrease, and there is an increased risk to disease and infection.